Right, well, we get started with the session. Probably be a few more people joining in. I'm noticing a few new faces and names have joined us. So just for the benefit of those people, this is the first SCF virtual gathering, Young Crofters gathering that we've held. We were planning to do something in a physical location. But events took over and we decided to do this Zoom event. It's been going well so far. I think we're starting to get used to it. Figured out some of the pitfalls. Before we move into the next session, which is on Scottish Crofting Produce, the Scottish Crofting Produce Mark and Croft Holidays, just another wee update on or a membership plug, I suppose it is. SCF is a membership organisation. Many of you here will be members already. But if you would like some more information about how to join and the various membership rates we have, we've got a brand new website. It's at www.crofting.org, and there's information there on various membership rates. If you're under 41, you get half price at £33.25, I think it is. As a member of the Federation, you get 3 copies of the Crofter magazine every year, access to our legal helpline, and you can also sign up to the Scottish Crofting Produce Mark if you meet the criteria, and that's what Russell and Beth are going to explain to us just now about the Scottish Crofting Produce Mark, what it can do for you, and just about adding value to the things that we produce. So I'm handing over to Russell, I think, first. Is it? Yep.
Okay, thanks, Donald. I'll just, it's going to take about 5 minutes, and I'll just go through, assuming you can hear me, I'll go through what the Scottish Crofting Produce Mark is, why we set it up in the first place, and a bit about where we're hoping to go with it. But me, we've got a croft outside Bonar Bridge. The main crofting activity is store lamb, so we don't use the Scottish Crofting Mark for that because they just go through the auctions in Dingwall and Lairg. But we do use the mark when we're selling eggs, preserves, and we used to do the Dornoch Farmers Market years gone past. And we also advertise through the Crofting Mark for our holiday cottage. So that's us. The Scottish Crofting Mark itself is a scheme which certifies that the product that you're selling is from a croft and is produced to a certain standard. So like all schemes that there's lots of them around nowadays, it's about giving the consumer confidence in what they're buying. And we've been running the scheme since 2009, so it is well established, but it's perhaps not as well known as we would like. So to qualify, the produce must be from a croft or similar in the Highlands and Islands. It must meet defined minimum standards, and these standards will vary depending what the type of produce that you're producing. And the producer using the mark must be an SCF member. And if you are using it, it's free to SCF members now, and you can use the mark and the logo to promote your products. Originally, the thought was that it was about food production and branding food coming from crofts, but we had a lot of craft people who wanted to join, so it now extends to crafts, again, produced in the croft, preferably using croft produce. And we do a lot of accommodation now, lots of tourism businesses. Again, it has to be run from the croft. So when we set it up, the aim was to add value to the produce from the croft. And the aim, if you're trying to build a brand in anything, it's about either selling more of what you've got or selling the same amount at a higher price, so you're adding value. Or possible, you want to sell more at a higher price. And if you think about crofting, and we did the market research to back this up, that the image of crofting crofts is lots of things like open spaces, fresh air, tends to be considered to be environmentally sound. Food, you've got local, naturally produced food, and there's a lot of culture and history that is part of that image. And that's really what we're trying to tap into and what we're trying to sell as part of the Crofting Produce brand. And as an example of that, if you look at QMS and all advertising they do for their lamb, it's all pictures of North Country Cheviot sheep, and it's Sylvan in the background. It's all Highland scenery. So they're trying to plug into this image as well. And again, we heard in the session, the videos this morning, people like Jake and Donald McSween, that there's a lot of, I put it, in the heritage and the culture side, because you are producing the stuff yourself, you are selling the story of that to the consumer who's buying it, and that's accommodation and food. And as I say, back in 2011 it was, we did some extensive market research over the whole country, and what it showed was that people were more likely to buy a product which was branded as from a croft than they were something that was just generically Scottish. So there is a basis there in which we can build something. Finally, just briefly, see, the mark's been going since 2009. It's due a revisit or a refresh. We've got a little team together now, and Beth is coming up as part of that. And we're trying to look and see what do we need to do to give it a bit more oomph. So we need more members. And then we can actually, if we can get a project together, we can look at the branding again, we can redo the market research, make sure we're aiming it in the right direction. And there may be opportunities if we get enough producers together. Can we do things like training? Can we get buyers groups together? Can we do joint advertising? So there's lots of ideas, there's lots of things we can do. And as I say, it's all about adding value to what you as crofters are producing and selling. So if you are producing stuff and selling direct to the customers, and if you're not a member, join now, please. Contact HQ or have a look at the website. Thank you. Beth, do you want to come in there?
Yep, right, thank you. I am just going to share the screen with you.
Well, while you're doing that, just say if anyone does have questions on this, because I rattled through that, as before, put it onto chat and there'll be time at the end for going through discussions.
Yeah, right. Can everyone see that fine? I'm just going to get something out at the bottom of the screen. I can just put this onto a small speaker. Get those out of the way. Right. If there's any issues, probably what to do is do it through chat to Ailsa, because I've got it so that I can see her rather than everyone else. Just while we do this. As I've said, my name is Beth, and I'm going to go over a bit just as a case study for our croft for how we use the produce mark. So I'll go over a little bit of who we are, what we do, what we sell, how we sell things. We obviously joined the QMS, so a little bit on that. And then a couple of things on how lockdown has changed this a little bit for us. And then there are question time, hopefully at the end, if we've got enough time for either Russell or myself, for if you've got any questions on this. So we're at Birchwood Croft. It's 35 acres in size. We are south of Inverness on the Monolith Mountains. It's run by my husband and I, and we have 2 mini crofters, who are 3 and 1, who can vary on helpfulness. Tim works offshore, so he is away for stints at a time. That can have its own thing. I was working as a nurse. I'm currently on a career break to then be doing this full time. And you'll see a bit later on how the nursing side probably affects some of the way that I do things. Neither of us had any agricultural background when we took on the croft. We moved on to the croft in 2012. It was a bare patch, bare canvas. There was no buildings, no boundary fence, water supply, electric. Currently, if we fast forward to the current situation, we have now got a house on the site. We deer-fenced 5 acres to plant about 5,000 trees. We then split the rest into 3 fields. They were all deemed as Region 3, which we had to fight to get one changed as a hay field. We do have a bio now with a handling area for the cows, a large polytunnel, soft fruit section, as well as a veg garden, an orchard. We've got a chicken pen that doubles as a sheep area, lots of electric fencing now, and then more recently we now have a hay shed, which we're very excited about. Our main croft income is from selling meat directly to our customers. We have a small herd of Shetland cattle that give us the beef. We have done hogget in the past, but we don't have any sheep at the moment. We decided we would briefly stop that because we got in bees this year. And so to concentrate on our new task, we decided we didn't have quite enough hours in the day and we would just need to put the sheep on hold for a bit. About every other year we do get in weaners. They help dig up bits of the ground that we can't reach with a tractor. It also gives us another product to sell that helps just with the customer basis that we have. The polytunnel went up 2 years ago. So last year was the first year that had enough excess produce from it really to then make chutneys, relish to sell on the side from it. We did do eggs in the past. I couldn't handle the chickens when I was pregnant, so we got rid of them at that point, but we are hoping to go back into that. Our first Shetland steer, Eric, went away in 2018. We've now done 9 since then, and it's been a massive learning curve. Not just with abattoirs, but butchers and customer wants, demands. Eric we sold as 10 kilo beef boxes. The butchery standards were appalling. I don't have a picture of those ones. This just shows 3 different butchery standards. But Eric, he had blood dripping from the bags. There was no labelling for anyone to know what they were buying. Thankfully, a lot of our first customers were family and friends, so they were pretty understanding for us. The majority struggled, interestingly enough, with having freezer space for our beef box. So that was something we picked up on. They liked the taste. The welfare of the animals had a lot going for them. But trying to start from scratch with customers, we were finding pretty difficult as a small scale food producer that was new on the market, really, for that. So we have made changes since then. We have tried several butchers. We've also done obviously several abattoirs. We are quite fortunate and we've got 2 choices of abattoirs near us. We now get all of our meat vacuum packed and we will pay extra for labelling. Some will label it, others we have to do it ourselves, which can get a bit time consuming. We now do everything as individually priced, so people can buy as little or as much as they want, and that has actually increased our sales really with having that rather than a beef box. A lot of this was trial and error, but in that learning curve, while in this process, something really challenged me as to how we were going to become really resilient in the future, because yes, enter Brexit. Brexit started the ball rolling as to kind of 2 issues. One, well, the potential flood for cheaper foods coming on. The welfare standards were highlighted by the media as to other countries, particularly in terms of cows. So people suddenly became interested in that. The chlorinated chicken saga started the issue about food processing for people. So with these two things, I was going, how am I going to reassure our customers or even new customers the provenance of the food, in a sense, from our field to their fork? With that, we got thinking, a bit of research. We were members of the SCF at that point, so I also came across the Scottish Crofting Produce mark. Having looked at it and seen what the values were, thought, okay, this is something I want to take on. To apply for the meat section of it, it says you had to be a member of QMS or another assured scheme. I had assumed QMS was for big farms selling directly to supermarkets. That isn't the case. The membership fee for QMS is based on how many livestock you put away a year. So being small scale producers, we are in the very bottom bracket. A slight side note for others, we don't have this option, but there is an application form for crofting group members for QMS. So it's worth, if anyone is in a group, to have a look into that one. The research into QMS, you can see in the top corner, they've got their cattle and sheep standards. I saw with it that you don't just show kind of what you do, they are looking for best practice with it. A lot of the things we did anyway, not everything, but a lot of the things we did, but it was just collaborating all of that into, in a sense, one folder. Yes, we'd had to deal with fallen stock. We had the receipts from it that they are getting picked up, that we're not illegally burying them, but putting that all together for the inspector was kind of what took a bit of time. I did ask a few farmers for just if I could look at their paperwork. None, in fact, let me see their paperwork. One even said their accountant did it for them, which I wasn't entirely sure what that meant, if they were just trying to get out of an excuse with it. But with that, all I did was I approached it in the same format that I do the NHS. Working as a nurse, we're used to hospital inspections, so I just did it in the same format. I didn't know what the QMS inspector would be looking for, but I figured, well, if I can, in a sense, prove what I'm doing, then hopefully they would be kind of happy with that. One of the sides for the QMS that has been coming up more recently is you do need a health plan by a vet, and the vet no longer will just say, okay, it's fine, or at least ours doesn't. However, both, it's probably worth noting, both the vet visit for this and having the QMS inspector is really worth its weight in gold, at least for us, because you can pick their brains. They know if there's any change in practice, things that maybe in the past they said, oh yes, that's fine. There may be now things that they say, in fact, this is what we recommend, which we wouldn't necessarily have known unless both of these people had turned up kind of on the croft doing inspections. So in that sense, it does give a massive satisfaction. A lot of crofting, you don't really get much thanks for it, but it does give you the satisfaction when you, in a sense, can deal with anyone turning up for a surprise inspection and going, you know what, here's my evidence, here's the proof, and this, we are aiming for high welfare standards, and I want the whole traceability for what I am giving people, in a sense, from our field to their fork. One of the slight perks we hadn't realised with QMS was we now get discounts for cattle testing, which we hadn't been aware of at all before it. It was early 2019 when we applied for the QMS. It took a wee bit of getting the paperwork together for it. But with that, we were able to apply for the crofting mark. We then wanted to know how we were going to use this to showcase the produce that we had. I had been doing the Crofting Wifey blog for a while, which had our meat listings on it. However, now I added the two links, both for QMS and the Scottish Crofting Produce, so people could if they had the time, wanted to look into it more. Then what I started to do was social media a bit more, particularly a Facebook page for the croft. So as Russell says, it's not just the produce people are after, it's the story. And in a sense, that's really what Facebook is really good for. You can give the story of the whole concept of not just here's high quality tasting meat, but here's what's gone into it. We did 2 local events because we decided rather than just staying behind a picture on social media, let's go show face a wee bit so people can put their, in a sense, our faces to their produce that they're buying. So we did the local Strathnairn Vintage Rally, so that's one of the pictures, hence why it's outside, and the other one was just our Christmas fair at the local hall. But having the produce mark meant we were able to change sales tactics. Anyone who's been involved in learning about marketing will know a bit on this one. So we were able to display 2 lots of information on the table. Having meat in a freezer and getting people to come to your table isn't easy. So I had the QMS leaflets, and they have quite a bit on recipes, which is a great conversation starter with people. The other one was, and this might not be for everyone, but around here, not everyone knows what a crofter is. So we had not just the information of what does a Scottish crofting produce mean, but also here, in a sense, again, is the whole story. Kind of here's what crofters do and how they can get involved with it. And that just meant people could come more to the table to have a look at what we had for it. Now, this was all going fine and dandy until February, when we were looking at getting the next year away. Our sales had improved from last year from doing these with being able to have the Crofting Produce logo and really wanting to market it more. Oops, I was going to say we've gone too far. But then lockdown hit. So we had arranged for a steer to go away. However, the abattoir suddenly wouldn't take private kills because they were getting swamped. So we had to go for option 2. The butcher was then getting hammered. So in the end, that steer got hung for 6 weeks, which then meant we had a higher value meat than, in a sense, what most people actually had initially thought we had. We could up the price because that was the recommendation of the butchers for it. Lockdown, though, also meant Tim was having to quarantine when he went offshore, so he was in away for 5 weeks at a time. They had no childcare option at that time, and it was a little bit of a mini heat wave at the start, so a lot of the stuff with the polytunnel needed a lot of work. I struggled quite a bit. What I noticed each evening when I sit down being chatted was a lot of friends on Facebook were sat at home twiddling thumbs. Their life had come to a complete halt, and they were then going, what am I going to do? So I upped the Facebook posts so that people, in a sense, could still be a part of it. I thought, well, they're not just getting the meat. I want them to know exactly what life on the croft means at the moment for me. It also did mean that it upped sales, interestingly enough, are local. Now, the term local can vary depending on who you are and who you sell to. It suddenly changed to us to dropping to a 14-mile radius. There's kind of 2 communities near us, and within those, we suddenly got a lot more people following the blog and the Facebook. So this meant that I was able to not just provide them, in a sense, with a quality meat, but they were asking for it because they'd followed the story of it. So it was the whole produce that they were looking for. Because they were more local, and obviously we couldn't travel, I started cycling deliveries out, which gives great entertainment to anyone who's self-isolating, is stuck indoors. You turn up on your bike. They want to know, not just they followed it on Facebook, they want to know about your cycle, but they also want to know about the chutney that you're selling them. They want to know about the beef. They want to know what you've been up to. People had that time to chat, and they do find it interesting for that story. Not just that, one of the stories that a lot in our community thought was calving happened during lockdown. thankfully my husband was home for calving. I have a slight concern each year that I'm on my own, because I have no backup this year. If something goes wrong, I have no backup. But it happened when he was home. Everything went fine anyway. One of the things with QMS was we had looked at the paperwork and we'd realised one of our older cows, who was from a dairy herd, had needed antibiotics for every year that she'd calved because she had mastitis. We hadn't noticed that because it went in the medicine book, and obviously other things are given in between. Having all the antibiotics on one sheet for QMS suddenly pointed out we had an issue. So we decided we'd change tactics this year. We decided we'd milk her, and we did it every day for 2 months. It is slightly challenging with 2 children. I'd obviously recommend it maybe with just 1, but what that did though was it also gave something else of that story of crofting, in a sense, on social media. Now, the one thing about milk was this suddenly got people interested in food standards. People wanted to know why they couldn't buy it. People wanted to know what I was doing with it. So that got a lot of the discussion going, which in a sense I found helped people not just go, I can pick up food from the supermarket. So I realised I actually needed to do a bit more on how to, it's not educate people, it's just help them to see the whole process of it. So with this, people started asking me about the calf, what I'd be doing with it. And I was going, it's going to be on your table in 2 years' time. They wanted to know a bit more about the food standards that we did, why we did things. And it is just coming back to how we use the land and why we do things, really. I am hopefully, I say in the process, I'm trying to fill out the form to now get the preserves that we make. It's mostly chutney and relish is the 2 things I do under the SCP mark, because I would say, having now done it with the meat, I would really like it on other products that we do, where people in a sense trace the whole thing. I did get the food hygiene, obviously, and this is where I recommend to people, look into if there's particular things that you want to sell, particularly in food, look into it and do the research to make sure that we're all coming to the same standard. I am quite picky on labelling and things, but again, that comes probably back to my nursing background with that. One of the things was I only started doing the preserves because I wanted something more visible on the community tables. That obviously went to pot during lockdown, that there was no kind of community market. However, it did mean we had a produce that was available kind of all year round, and that was one of the things that people then wanted to buy during lockdown that I then was able to have when I sold out of the steer. So having that kind of, again, interaction with people has helped. But obviously what I prefer to do is have the, in a sense, the logo on it, so people know the whole story really behind it. We do also try now and invite pretty much any new customers to come and see the croft. I don't want them to think that I'm only putting up certain pictures and I'm hiding the rest. I'm quite happy for anyone to turn up, ask for meat, turn up, and then pretty much from where they can pick it up, they can see the croft and they can ask the questions. Not everyone has an idea of what crofting is, so it sometimes helps on how to get conversations going. Sometimes if you have an idea on just things that you can put really in there to help people grasp crofting and really the lifestyle of it. As a crofter, I would look to others with the mark, because to me it doesn't just give people a produce, but it does ensure a certain standard. It's not just that, it's the provenance really of that food, or in a sense that product. So it's not all necessarily food, and it's also a culture that isn't maybe common elsewhere. Those of us in the Highlands and Islands, yes, we're aware of it, but to others it's not. Now, on our craft, we can only manage a certain level of production. For anyone who noticed, we don't do sheep anymore, but we have people asking for hogget. But this is where, if I knew others that I could network, that I can send these customers to, because what we find is helpful is so that they don't have to go back to the supermarket really. They are more likely to keep engaging with you. And that's where I guess some probably struggle in some ways from who I've chatted to sell, how they can sell their produce. And that's where it's one, if we can network together, if more people can join, we could probably network. We all have valuable, a lot of us have valuable sources utilising the land. Obviously, I know it is a struggle to get crofting generally, but the kind of food for thought is, are we really sitting on the Champagne version of Scotland? You kind of think, what am I talking about? Champagne is just a region in France, but yet that word symbolises a certain high quality food product. It also has a certain criteria that has to be to match that one word. It's not something that they did overnight. They obviously built up to it. I may be able to buy my sparkling wine from somewhere else, but does it have, in a sense, the whole story that the French have for champagne? So I'll leave you with that wee thought. Obviously, it would be great to get more people to join, so that in a sense we can try and network together. So that is a very brief overview, obviously, of us, how we use it. It is very, I was going to say, individual for us in how we've done it and how we really market to our audience, our customers. I would say QMS, if you are interested in joining it and you are struggling in any way or you want to know more about it, I am quite happy to chat about it, because I obviously faced a few farmers who just wouldn't let me see their paperwork, so I didn't really know what QMS were after. Producers for the crofting mark can all be found on the website, so you can see other people, because that's the other thing is, if you get, particularly now that tourists are back in, you can point them to it to help for the advertising, to go, oh, if you go into there, there's someone who you can buy produce from. And then if you do have any other questions on it, because obviously there are application forms to join to get the logo, to join the mark, you will probably need to get in touch with the office. But otherwise, I will end there. So I guess if there's any questions, either for Russell or myself, because I did rattle through that, but if anyone has any questions, we can answer them for you.
Do you want to unshare, Beth, if you...
Yes, I'm trying to figure out how to unshare.
We've got
while Beth's doing that, I'll make a couple of points. One is about labelling, which, if you're doing preserves and things, is quite complicated. But when we started up the Dornoch Farmers Market, we actually got the environmental health officer, the local guy, along to explain it all to us and to give us the books. And he was quite helpful. And, you know, again, like most of these things, once it's explained, it's fairly straightforward. The other thing I'd say about QMS is that they do a lot of generic marketing of Scottish lamb and Scottish beef. And so in one sense, your membership is going to a cooperative, which is promoting everybody. But on the standards, what they're asking for, certainly in sheep, is nothing out of the ordinary. It's things you should be doing anyway, generally. And the paperwork, if you're doing it for the first time, is complicated. But for each subsequent year, you're just rolling it on. And I find it very useful, not just, as Beth was saying, for a free bit of consultancy, but also it forces me once a year, when I know the guy's coming, to actually sit down and make sure my paperwork is in order and that my health plan is up to date and things. And that is very useful, because I generally wouldn't do it otherwise.
Does anyone have any questions for Beth and Russell, what they've been talking about there? It was a brilliant presentation, Beth. Thank you so much. A lot of work.
Yes, yeah, welcome. I obviously did rattle through it, so it is, if anyone wants to get in touch, if anything wasn't clear, obviously feel free. I am on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram I'm less keen on, but
I think the whole thing, just to go back to one of the points about the story, if you look at all the Visit Scotland and all the marketing stuff about tourism, that authenticity is a word that keeps coming up. And that is what we as crofters have, because we're living the dream, living the lifestyle. I don't like to call it a lifestyle, but it's, you know, we are part of it. We're part of that heritage. We're part of the story. And you should be able to explain about the land and the history of it. And we had people in the caravan site last week, and the two kids there, and I took them up the hill to show them our 3,500 year old hut circle. And they were going, wow, yes, it's 3,500 years old. Whoa, you know. So it's that sort of sense of history and culture that we are in a position to put forward and that people want to hear. So that's our selling point.
I see, Maria, you've asked about a change in demand. Yes. So we normally put away 2 to 3 steers a year is what we've normally done in the past. This time I sold the steer within a month. So it's normally about 6 months that I look for if it's 2 steers that we've done that year. I have only 2 top sides and 3 packs of sausages left from that steer. The demand did go up hugely. It's interesting though that we've kept a lot of those customers. I had expected that a lot would go back to supermarkets. However, one guy just the other day admitted to me that they have not bought meat again from the supermarket since. So that was quite reassuring, because it was that, are we just there because they can't get the food elsewhere? But it has kept up.
See, there's a question there from, oh, I've lost it again. Sorry, it keeps moving. Karen is asking, where did you start with selling meat? Did you choose the Shetland as a breed for meat?
So we chose Shetland breed because my husband was, for whatever reason, had done research and wanted to do them. I am now glad that he picked Shetland cattle for it, because they're a lot weer than other cattle. And because I have to deal with them all on my own, I don't really need something that's going to cause massive damage to me. Yes, even a small cow can cause that, but I want ones that I feel comfortable with. So, and the hope is I would like to milk in the future. Obviously with 2 young boys, it's not the easiest. We started off selling, in fact, quite a lot to Edinburgh. We moved up from Edinburgh. So this is where the term local can affect people, because I didn't classify that as local. I then went on a few women in agriculture courses and was chatting to other people, and I discovered more from the hotel and selling people. So I spoke to a few more on the business side, and to them, local classified as Scotland. So that made me really increase where I thought I could sell my meat to. We have done half a pig in an overnight delivery to Preston, but I think that is probably the furthest we've sent something. But we were aware that if the distance to Edinburgh is not always there, that was why we thought, let's try and get more local people. So going back to COVID, put local back into what I thought local meant. And that was why we'd thought we'd prefer to try and do a few local stalls so people could, in a sense, see who we were. Shetland, going back to the breed, they are classified as a dual purpose. So they don't tend to have meat where your demand sometimes get them. But what we are noticing is that people are changing what the demand is. And this is again where it involves a bit of marketing. I don't know if on one of my slides, I've seen a few photos of where I've done pictures of preparing meat and trying to do a bit more on the food side to help get people aware of how they can use how they can use the meat. Lamb flank is one of the few things that we sell, but as I try and get people going, the amount of fat you can get off of it to make proper Yorkshire puds, here you go. And it's that type of thing that suddenly then gets a few people saying, can I buy that? So yes, Shetland breeds are not as beefy as the back end as other ones, but it's still, in a sense, it's something that I can work, and we can still try and, this comes back to the, I don't mean to be patronising, but educate people to buy in to this. Interesting enough, brisket is one of our highest selling meats, and yet it's classified as it's a cheap one. So there is a change in slow cooking, and trying to tap into that market is what we're trying to do.
Russell, I don't know if you're seeing the questions. There's Scott, our friend from America, is asking, is the produce mark known in the export market for non-perishable Croft products?
No is the answer to that. I mean, there's no reason why it shouldn't be, but we have not made any central effort to promote it abroad. If individual producers were using it, that would be great. But you're right. I mean, there is the potential for US with all their Highland games, and Canada with the the top-ranking pipe bands. There is an interest in all these things, and it requires a drive or a push, or with promotion that could work. But we're not there yet.
I've just seen another question there about asking, obviously we moved from selling from beef boxes to individual cuts. We've done it not with just beef, but we did it with a hogget as well, because we obviously within driving distance of Inverness, and a lot of people just don't have freezer spaces, is what we've discovered. So you potentially have, and I'm not wanting to stereotype, but you have your old dear in a bungalow who has very little freezer space, but she's quite happy to buy the pack of high quality steaks and a packet of mince, but she wants it every other week. So with that, that was where, for us, identifying what our customers were asking for was why we now have 4 freezers on site. And that's where a comment that Donald McSween mentioned earlier was having to factor in the price of things such as having the freezers on site that we have to pay for. Has to go on to that, but it does mean people know that they have meat generally here available all year round. It's not as if it's a once off and they've got to figure out where they're storing it. We do find some customers will generally always buy fillet steaks, and others just want the cheaper cuts, but that tends to, I would say, average out, if that makes sense. So for every person who wants to buy 5 packs of fillet steaks, we have the 3 who want the cheaper cuts. And the other thing is, you get very good at, if you suddenly get left with 3 topside roasts, you become an expert in topside roast cooking. But that does mean, again, what you do is, I would point out, River Cottage recipes are very good to queue. And it then again comes back to take people through the story as you're preparing it. Cooked meat actually is very hard to take photos that are really good, but preparing food, even if it's, this is going to sound a bit daft, even the onions, if you can get the picture right, but you have the recipe in the background, can help you sell that meat. Whereas if you take a picture of a topside roast coming out of the oven, it looks bogging. Oh, apologies, but it does on social media. So it's that coming back to that marketing technique that you use on how you get people to take it on board. And it is interesting that you usually do, well, we find, get spikes. If I have done a few, particularly things such as, we may get 20 packs of sausages that I want to clear. So I start putting up, right, what am I doing with it? So then people go, oh, that's a good idea. I'm fed up on my own food. That's a good one. What's your recipe? So again, it's that engaging with people. But I honestly would say just avoid photos of cooked meat. But anyway.
That sounds like good advice, speaking as a vegetarian. Okay, that was brilliant, Beth and Russell. Donald, are you ready to rock and roll?
Yeah.